we've got to speak about Arsenal. The transfer window has been insane already. It's been absolutely crazy. And I said more football content was coming. I said more transfer content was coming in the build up to this season that's fast approaching as we try and reach 1,000 subscribers. So if you're new, subscribe to the channel. But I didn't think that the first sort of video I'd be making about me talking about a different team would be about Arsenal. But it is. Look, Arsenal have potentially already won the transfer market. They have signed Kai Havertz, Declan Rice is pretty much done, and Timber is potentially on his way from Ajax. All in the region of about £200 million. Arsenal spent big last summer, or 2 summers ago as well. They've done it again. They've invested very well this time. This time, Arsenal haven't gone for real potential. They've gone for players that are almost at the highest level of the game. Like, they're not far. Kai Havertz, once a wonder kid, a player who's won the Champions League at Chelsea. We're talking about Declan Rice, one of the most wanted midfielders for the last couple of years. A player that will move to Arsenal for a fee of over 100 million. This shows his level. He is a top midfielder. There are people out there trying to say that Declan Rice isn't good enough, isn't a £100 million player. Look, he's worth that to West Ham, and his ability suggests to me that he is worth every penny. As a Chelsea fan, it hurts me that Declan Rice a few seasons ago seemed like it was guaranteed to happen, that he would wear the blue of Chelsea. But look, I'm not talking about Chelsea in this one. I'm talking about how I think Arsenal might have already won the transfer window. How I think that next year they will have a squad that can compete for the league even better than what they did this year. I really do believe that. I think Arsenal's recruitment this summer, and I need to specify this, for them is perfect. I think it's enough for them to close that gap to City where they switched off a bit last season. I really think that's the case. And we're going to go through each signing because they all need a little bit of detail and a bit of context as to why I think that just 3 signings could mean that Arsenal potentially have already won the transfer market and have won the league before it's even started. So we need to look at last season. Arsenal were in such a strong position for so long last year. For so long, they were getting results that you questioned that they might not. And it looked like they were doing what was needed to win the Premier League title. Albeit, Manchester City, Pep Guardiola and Erling Haaland were on course for one of the most historic seasons ever. A treble. And unfortunately, Arsenal felt the full wrath and pressure of that. And they unfortunately, as some said, bottled the league. I'm not sure whether they fully bottled the league. I think they weren't ever going to be able to compete against the Manchester City side that was going to do that. But I do think they probably should have achieved more last season than what they did. But a terrific season when you look at where they were not so long ago under Arteta to where they are now. It's incredible. Arsenal are back amongst the big boys. On the back of that shirt is Thierry Henry's name. Arsenal are attracting players as big as players that they were attracting when he was at the club. Arsenal Football Club are potentially reclaiming their crown of English football and London. And it worries me as a Chelsea fan, but we've got to address it. We've got to talk about it. Because they are signing arguably the best English midfielder in the Premier League right now. I can't say the world because there'd be a debate about Bellingham. Other than that, Declan Rice is top. He is a phenomenal player. A player that when Manchester City came in a few weeks ago, or a week ago, I didn't doubt for a minute that would be his destination. But City, again, have pulled out of a transfer. When that bid goes a little bit higher than where they value a player, they just say no. That's it. Done. No bidding wars, nothing. And that's what's happened here. And now it looks like Declan Rice is on his way to Arsenal. A great addition to a side that I felt lacked physicality. They lost Xhaka, who provided so much. Declan Rice adds what Xhaka adds in terms of physicality. He's probably a little bit more disciplined. And technically, in the positions that Xhaka was picking up last season, I think Declan Rice could be a better player. I don't think he can strike a ball like Xhaka could with that left foot. But everything else, I think Declan Rice could potentially be better than Xhaka. I really, really do. And I know Arsenal fans actually really like Xhaka in the end, but this is a massive improvement. You all need to be aware of that. Anyone saying Declan Rice isn't top is, I don't know what game of football they're watching. He is a great player, an England international, and a phenomenal upgrade to Arsenal's midfield. Probably the key to unlock their attack even more. I think he is the perfect hybrid and link between defence and attack in a football team, and he helps teams to transition. West Ham, obviously, England as well. He helps them to transition and counter-attack so well, so quickly, so efficiently, and he can ball carry. A great player, ticks so many boxes, and probably, this pains me to say it, but a future Arsenal captain as well. I think that might be the case. So then we need to step up the pitch for Arsenal. Probably the area last year that, along with Saliba getting injured, probably cost them the league. And I think that's up front. I think they were flying last season at the beginning. They were doing very well when Nketiah stepped in. But when Jesus returned, all of a sudden, there was a selection debate. Would Nketiah stay in? Would Jesus return to the form that he was on previously? And it never really clicked again. Saka, Martinelli, these players were still performing. There's players in the background like Reece Nelson, Smith Rowe. They were, Smith Rowe a little bit less, but in and around the attack. They had a very fluid attack. And it was all glued together by a magician in Martin Odegaard. One of the best players in Europe right now. He is a phenomenal player, an extremely technically gifted player with a superb eye for a pass. And he has excelled and become so much more than that wonder kid that we saw ripping up Norwegian youth football and the Norwegian league at such a young age, and the move to Real Madrid, and it all sort of came a bit too soon. But now we are seeing why and how so much was expected of him at such a young age, and he has matured so much. And he still possesses that exquisite flair that he has and showed for the last probably 5, 6, 7 years as a kid developing into an exceptional footballer. And Kai Havertz enters that fluid, creative, small attack, and he adds height, he adds some sort of presence. Now, as a Chelsea fan who's watched Kai Havertz week in, week out, you are not getting a target man. You are not getting a player that adds physicality. He will lose aerial duels. He will be bullied off the ball, and his first touch isn't always exceptional. But there is something about Kai Havertz that reminds me of, and I likened it to, as a Chelsea fan, it was easiest for me to do this, Ida Gudjonsson. Now, I don't know how many Arsenal fans are going to be aware of what he had, but Kai Havertz is a player, for me, and this might sound ridiculous, is better when he doesn't have the ball at his feet. Kai Havertz's off-the-ball movement is exceptional. Kai Havertz's ability to disappear and appear in the correct position is amazing. There are things to Havertz's game that never worked out at Chelsea. And I don't think they ever will, because Chelsea's striker situation at the time wasn't there. It wasn't set. It wasn't ready. The manager was always changing. It was never a perfect scenario for Kai Havertz. And that's what he needed. And I've got this feeling that he might have found that at Arsenal, because everything's sort of in place and you just put him in players will be picked up and people are already aware of the threat that players at Arsenal already possess. And then you add Kai Havertz to the mix with the creativity of Odegaard and the ability of Saka, Martinelli, Jesus to work off the ball, do Havertz's dirty work, and be ultimately the finisher. It will allow Havertz to appear in positions where no one expected him to be. The defence didn't read his run. And all of a sudden, Havertz is there. And I think if it works for Kai Havertz, people will be shocked that Chelsea sold him for that amount of money, questioning why another striker didn't work out at Chelsea. But if it doesn't, then obviously that won't be the case. And people will be saying, wow, Chelsea got a phenomenal amount of money. And Chelsea have done well to reclaim most of the fee because it hasn't worked. And arguably, if you look at Havertz's stats, it's not been great. I don't see Havertz as the midfielder that people are talking about, as the replacement to Xhaka. I think if that was the case, you wouldn't be signing Rice. So I see Havertz as I've described it before, other players as well, a second striker. I don't think he's fully a 10. I don't think he's completely creative, although he has a good eye for a pass like Odegaard. I think Odegaard will be your main option here. Havertz is versatile, but he's not exceptional in any role. The reason I think Havertz will succeed is because I feel like Arsenal have already got those roles covered, and Havertz will be a fantastic option to have in and around the attack for Arsenal. He's a player that can, like I said, disappear and appear in the right areas and is arguably better with the ball away from him and him having one of the final touches towards the build-up of a goal. And I know that might sound crazy, but I've watched Havertz have the ball in his own half, get tackled, be bullied off the ball. Some of his passes go astray fairly often. He holds onto the ball too long. When Havertz is allowed to use his knowledge and spatial awareness to find those areas on the pitch and make incredible runs, and the ball is coming from the creative players Arsenal have, I think he could be really good. I really do. I don't begrudge Chelsea for selling him because it hasn't worked out, but I genuinely think there is a good player in Kai Havertz. I just think, as a Chelsea fan, it was time, and as a Chelsea player as well, it was time for Havertz to move on because it wasn't working out for him. He knows his level. He knows if he can be good. And I think, Arsenal fans, you should be excited about Kai Havertz. I'll be honest, I don't think he's been good enough at Chelsea. I do think he still needs to adapt his game to England a little bit. But if he can thrive and the players at Arsenal allow him to thrive and benefit his type of game, where he isn't the main man and he's allowed to be the second player, if all four of Arsenal's attack chip in with 10 to 15 goals, some even 20, then I start to think Arsenal could win the league. And then we go back to the defence where they're now being linked with Timber from Ajax. Obviously, any defender coming out of Ajax is incredible on the ball. That's the number one thing. They're going to be a good footballer. So last year we saw Saliba get injured. We saw Ben White playing right back. We saw Arsenal improving their defence, but probably if they were going on to play Champions League and wanted to compete in every competition, they probably needed another top-level centre-back to make sure that they compete every game that they play in. And if they get Timber, one of the hottest prospects in world football, in European football, in that position, coming out of Ajax, a phenomenal ball-playing team, they are adding a fantastic string to their bow. Because not only does he add defensive cover in a team where an injury was so costly to Arsenal last season, he also adds to this team. If you want to play him right back, he can cover there. He's probably a little bit more mobile than Ben White, a little bit more technically gifted than Ben White, I would say, on the ball. Ben White wasn't bad last season. Let's get this straight. I was so impressed by his ability to step over to the right-hand side of the pitch and play so well and be so key to Arsenal. But he needs a rest just as much as the others. Timber adds the ability to play three at the back. If Arteta mimics Pep Guardiola's style at the moment at Manchester City, do not be surprised. He also allows them to do that. He doesn't have the height of some of Arsenal's other centre-backs, but he has pace that I'd say Arsenal already have in abundance, but he's better than Rob Holding. He's better than that level of replacement. So if Timber isn't starting every game, don't be surprised. But if Timber ends up playing every game, also don't be surprised, because he has the ability to do that. He has the ability to step up to being a top-class player, to be a full international for his country as well, consistently in a good side. It's a great signing. And you know what? It's only 40 million. I saw that Aston Villa are being linked with Pau Torres, who I think was linked with Arsenal a few years ago, Manchester United, for 55 million. Timber for 40 million is an absolute steal, and a player that Arsenal should be buzzing about, because it's strengthening an area that was costly to them last season when they fell short of a top-level player in that position. He is a top-level player. He will be, for the longevity of Arsenal's new generation, a top-level player. And for 40 million, it seems like a really good deal. And then when you add it all up, for 200 million, Arsenal's recruitment is very good. These players fix problems that Arsenal had. And they might not have worked at every team. Like if Kai Havertz went to United, I don't think he'd be the answer. If Declan Rice went to City, I think he'd still do all right. I think Dec is a good enough player to be good in any team in the world. Timber wouldn't be successful at every club. He needs to be in a technical side. I think it works very well for Arsenal. I think Arsenal last year, where injuries cost them, it arguably contributed towards them losing out on the title. They're addressing those issues. And when you look at how much, for example, Chelsea have spent on players over the last season, and then all of a sudden Arsenal bring in 3 for 200 million, and it addresses every problem they pretty much had, and now any other signing is a bonus for Arsenal, you start thinking they might close that gap, because it's another year where these young players are now used to the system. And if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be very, very excited going into next season with these additions and what the next 10 years might hold as an Arsenal fan, because I think the future is exciting for Arsenal, and I think the days of Arsenal being laughed at might be behind us. Chelsea need to pull their finger out, don't they? Anyway, have a good one. Catch you in the next one. And let's see what happens in the transfer market. Subscribe if you like the content. It's not always Arsenal. It's a lot of football stuff, and we're coming up with more and more football stuff, obviously, as the transfer window and next season develops. Anyway, see you in a bit.